Good morning, good night, good evening, even to everybody out there. How's life in the north, Brendan?
Excellent. I love the way you've got this kind of global idea of the program down. Good morning, good evening, good night, good afternoon. Whatever corner of the globe you're listening into, Ollie, we've got you covered. Well done. Well, everything's fine up here in the north. I hope your water issues have receded somewhat. For the want of a
they have receded. Everything's come sort of back to normal for a while, although I would have said the same thing a week ago. We've been having intermittent power cuts now for about a week. Water cuts for about a week. I was just thinking, Brendan, it's very strange how whenever there's a problem with my bill, Aqueducto, they can't get onto me fast enough to complain and try to find out what the problem is. When one of their hydrants breaks on the Septima, it takes them a week to sort it out. Funny that, isn't it?
It is strange. It always falls back on the lowest common denominator in these things, doesn't it? The bill payer himself. I do have a slight confession to make, Ollie. I got out of the city 23 kilometers north of here to Kahika on my old, I call her my Mary Poppins bike. It's like an old High Nelly, if anyone's listening can remember those. It makes you work, or she makes you work. I'll put it that way. There's no real streamline for speed on that bike. But it was just nice to have a tiny little break outside of the city. But anyway, there we go. Will we check out what we've got coming up, Ollie? We might as well crack on with tonight's show. Bogota Nights, of course, guys. It is Colombia's only live and interactive English language chat show. Now, is it a case of health being wealth or wealth meaning health in these parts? While in theory, Colombia's public-private health model looks solid and fit for purpose, the practice is at times rather different. As a foreigner here, what are the best health insurance options available to you? Should you go fully private, if you have the means, or go through the EPS or EPS system, if your migration status allows you to, that is. We'll be discussing this and other health-related issues in the second half of the show. And as ever, we want to hear your thoughts and personal experiences using medical services here, be they good, bad, or indifferent. Do get your messages into us using the live comments section right now, and they will appear on our screen. Or if you're watching this recorded, you can still get involved by commenting on where you're watching or via tweet, the handle being at Bogota Post with the hashtag Bogota Nights. Of course, Bogota Post, everybody's favorite English language newspaper in Colombia. Before that, it's our take on the week's big news stories, and we might be set for some significant musical chairs at the top of Colombian politics in the coming weeks. Now, you can't run a country without an Uribe near the top table, can you? But more on that shortly. But first, Ollie, Bogota has cautiously loosened the coronavirus chains somewhat. We're now in a more relaxed orange alert. What does this mean, firstly, on paper?
Well, on paper, Brendan, there's quite a significant change. So the curfew of 8 o'clock has been pushed back now till 11 o'clock. So I'd say that's a fairly significant win. That's going back very close to how we've had it, if you think back to October or so forth. Pico y Cédula will stay with us. There doesn't seem to be an obvious ending. I mean, I think it's the end of this month, but very much I wouldn't be surprised to see that extended. Equally, I wouldn't be surprised to see it dropped very fast. All the localized lockdowns have all been lifted. So there's no area, everybody in the city is being treated equally at the moment. Very much it's, Ciclovia will be open. Everybody's open for trade, etc., etc., etc. It's as close to normality as, frankly, we could have expected.
Now, again, on research purposes, I popped into Barrio Santandercito and my old local tienda, which hasn't been available for sit-in service since this lockdown, or since the pandemic commenced, I should say. And I asked the owner, I said, well, could you technically open now and have customers in here if they comply with the biosecurity protocols? And she was there, well, I don't know, but I'm not going to open just yet. So are tiendas still in that grey area, or do we know?
Do you mean a drinking tienda?
Yes, a drinking tienda.
Well, I'm not being facetious. I mean, obviously, actually, I'm surprised. Yeah, obviously, regular tiendas are absolutely open, and I'm sure I've seen people drinking in tiendas throughout this week. So, yeah, I would be very surprised if not. I mean, I think like anything, Brendan, you alluded to this earlier when you said on paper. Paper and practice might well be two very separate things.
Yeah, well, it kind of almost seemed like they've become used to this particular tienda because there are other tiendas that have had sitting customers when maybe they shouldn't have had sitting customers, and I won't say any more than that. But this particular one, because it's kind of close to my heart, it's an old couple who I almost call them my mammy and my Colombian mammy and daddy. But they kind of almost seem like, oh, well, we can't open just yet. Whereas I don't know what the rule is, because when I asked them, they go, well, what have you heard? And I said, no, I'm asking you. I thought you could technically open now, but they've just got one shutter open, and you can buy drink for takeout, and that's it. Or you could, technically lean on the counter where they have it open towards the street and drink if you wanted to there, but I'm not sure if that's even legal at this stage. One thing you mentioned, the pico reschedule, you're kind of in favor of this continuing maybe indefinitely because it can kind of.
Whoa! I'm saying
indefinitely. Okay, you can correct me, but let me finish.
Okay, go on.
But the benefits of pico reschedule is that the smaller tiendas and stores don't tend to have it in operation, so therefore it means you're kind of forced, if it's not your cedula day and you need to get something, that you won't go to the Éxito, you won't go to the Jumbo or whatever, and you'll go to the smaller tienda and help the local businesses.
Yes, absolutely. That I am actually pretty much in favour of. I don't think it's an intended effect necessarily, from the Alcaldía, but I do like where it's going. I mean, you raised a couple of good counters to that, that people will just go to save a day and go to Éxito the next day. There'll be people that order online, things like that. But I think it is a major encouragement. I think, for example, you mentioned my water panic situation. I'd imagine some people went to their local tienda to get water rather than going to a supermarket because they could go into there.
Yeah. Now, in terms of education, schools are in theory, again, like as we say, on paper and the practice, because I've read a few headlines now, there's still no agreement between, I don't know, the teachers unions and different public schools in terms of how many students are going to be back in. But as things stand, next Monday, private schools can open, and the following Monday, the 15th, public schools. So we should be set for a little more traffic in the city if that happens, and we get even a 50% capacity.
Yeah, just as those computers get delivered to kids so they can have their classes online, time to go back into school. Fantastic stuff.
Well, as ever, the optimist there. Well, at least they'll have a device that they can have it for another few weeks. I wonder will they come looking for them? Surely not. They'll be sold.
Do they? Yeah, I mean, there's a big question there, isn't there? Do they exist? Or do they just exist on paper and somebody's pocketing all the? Who knows?
Well, there was, you can't do a rollout like this without a photo shoot. And Claudia Lopez a couple of weeks ago had photos on Facebook of her walking around in various barrios, handing delighted students their tablet or whatever else it was and computers. And also, but on the educational point, so I think it's a kind of a wait and see approach, because any parents I've spoken to, and again, my old couple, they have grandchildren of school-going age around like 6 and 10 years of age, and they're out of the city in Garagoa. So I said, "Oh, are they coming back now with the plans of going back to school?" And they're, "Well, we're not sure. Will they go back?" So there's a lot in it. And of course, you're in university. Universities can open also at a 35% capacity, random number. But you're not going to be.
Yeah, come on. I mean, that's not really 35. It's just it's 1/3 really. But yeah,
not right. 33.3 and a recurring percent.
Well, or just write 1/3. I mean, people understand fractions. It's not that hard. Yeah, I don't know, Brendan. Simple answer is I'd be quite uncomfortable going back to presential classes, as we call them, face to face, for one simple factor, which is that a lot of my students are not in Bogota. They've gone back to family homes and stuff, and we can't really expect them, having told them a couple of weeks ago, classes are online this semester, and we can't turn around and say to them, oh, well, come back and sort out rent in the middle of a still ongoing, let's not forget, pandemic situation, blah, blah, blah. So, yeah, no, it's pretty much a no-go, I think, for me. I suspect some other teachers, though, will have classes which they'll be able to benefit from having presential again.
Okay. Now, Ollie, I must confess, I've been kind of Bogota focused and podcast, YouTube channel focused the last couple of days. Have there been other developments outside of Bogota? Like, what's the story in Medellin? Or do you know anything about that? I've lumped this question on you, I know. But
as far as I'm aware, Medellin is pretty open. Just like in Bogota, distancing rules if you're having events. Friends of mine are putting on events in Medellin for later this month. So I would imagine that's opening up. Imagine Cali and Bucaramanga probably to be a little bit more tough. I think Parque Tayrona is opening up the middle of this month, but that's not unusual for them. I mean, Tayrona normally closes at this time of year anyway for ecological regrowth. A friend of mine was in Santa Marta going to Playa Grande, is it Playa Blanca over there? So, that seems to be up and running and functioning as normal.
So it does seem like we're kind of gradually, the wheels are turning back to to a new normal, I should say, rather than back to a new normal. But yeah, okay. There was another question I was going to ask you there. Oh, yes, so I was going to say, of course. Well, the vaccines, yes, but before we get to that, because we were talking about this last week, so this is good news for any U.S. citizens listening who are in Bogota or wherever, that they can go out now and watch the Super Bowl in peace and quiet without kind of worrying about regulations.
They can very rarely be quiet, in my experience, but in relative peace, yes.
Well, anyway, okay, we'll leave that one there. But yes, vaccines. And it is, of course, for some people in the English-speaking world anyway, it's the month of dates. And we're going to be talking more about that next week, as in Valentine's Day on the 14th of February. And we've been getting a lot of dates. We mentioned 8th of February for private colleges to go back, 15th of February for public colleges to go back to school. And the 20th of February, we're going to commence Operation Rollout of the Vaccine. So we've got a
allegedly
date. Oh no, this is guaranteed. I put my house on this.
Actually, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if you probably could bet your house on the first vaccine going out, bang on 20th of February. How soon the rest of them get there, I don't really know. But let's be prepared to, let's give them the benefit of the doubt. Why not? It is a very difficult situation. I know I've been banging this drum for a little while, but frankly, I think it needs to be repeated. Look at places like the EU, that is having all kinds of trouble delivering, vaccines to their population. It's not as simple as saying, well, we need the vaccine to get done, so it's going to get done. This is a tricky business. I don't think Colombia is in a terrible position. Could it be better? Yes. Could it be reasonably expected to be better? I don't think so, really, to be honest. I think it's pretty much... I mean, to be honest, let's say it happens on the 20th of February. That puts them about 2 months behind the UK, which produced one of the vaccines, and is fantastically more, has factories that are producing the vaccines, is fantastically wealthy, fantastically influential, blah, blah, blah. To say that Colombia is only 2 months behind a country like the UK, well, that's certainly not terrible. It's about a month behind Argentina. It's kind of where you expect Colombia to be, I would have thought.
Yeah, kind of one of the leading lights in a sense, on the top half of the table of Latin America in that regard. Yeah, we'll see how it rolls out. Actually, this is a great opportunity for a plug here now, Ollie, but I was talking to Dr. J. Bhattacharya from the Stanford University and a co-author of the controversial Great Barrington Declaration. But he did give Colombia plaudits in terms of getting its hands on the vaccine, but he's not very optimistic that lower income nations will have anything close to kind of an acceptable number of vaccines distributed by August, where he expects the United States to be kind of well on its way by August, and the likes of the UK should be well on its way as well. So he's kind of thinking we're going to have this half and half world, half vaccinated, half not, and with a lot of restrictions as well to boot with that. But yeah, let's be optimistic. Let's see how it goes along. Of course, I got into a little bit of trouble from a very kind of nationalistic Colombiana when she read a story of mine this week where I said, well, more than likely it won't be too efficient, the process. I said, well, what are you basing that on? Well, I'm just kind of going on other things that happen in this country. It may not be the smoothest of rollouts. And there are other, there are reasons that are out of politicians' hands in this as well, of course. It's not just blaming bureaucracy or the administration. But anyway, I couldn't help but wondering, and I can't let you go on that, Ollie. You had a little dig at the EU there. You're a big Brexiteer. You're delighted to have the UK.
No, but certainly not. But my point is, we're talking about an exceptionally rich, block of countries, and if it's difficult for them to, to get hold of vaccines, we're seeing companies like AstraZeneca, basically holding countries like Italy, to ransom and just say, no, we're not delivering, on promises made. If somebody like the EU doesn't have that bargaining power, well, why would you expect Colombia to?
Yeah, exactly. Of course, there was news that they've the Chinese vaccine has been approved, so that's another player in it as well. I mean, we're kind of seeing vaccine politics in this too.
Yeah, and of course Sputnik with very, very encouraging news this week about their efficiency rate. So yeah, I mean, imagine that's going to kick off. And again, this puts Colombia in a bit of a difficult position. Do you follow the kind of America as they would normally be expected to, or do you say, well, look, China and Russia are here to help us? Of course, Colombia has a very good relationship with Russia, always has done.
Has it? Yeah, historically.
Yeah, the Colombians don't need a visa to visit Russia.
Oh, that's why a lot of them went to the World Cup back in there.
Yes, I know, absolutely, yeah, because unlike most other nations, it wasn't a pain. It wasn't a pain in the backside to get the visa sorted.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll move on from that. And by the way, guys, if you do have any comments, do fire them in here. I see Kieran Duffy's been already on the go.
I would point out to Kieran, by the way, I have raised this with our producer. I can't see anything there that I can't see anything that says Colombia with an U, with a U. So I don't know where he's seeing that.
No, I think, Ollie, that might be the automatic subtitles that Facebook put up. So don't. It's nothing to do from our side or Final Prensa or Radio Debate. It's a Facebook issue.
It's pretty much the #1 faux pas in Colombia. Yeah. That is.
Let's get on to Mark Zuckerberg. As powerful as he is, he can't spell Colombia right. The country. He's thinking of Colombia in the US, I guess. Anyway, I just leave a comment in there. Okay, that might be more to do with when we're talking. Yeah, when we're talking about our health issues. Well, it just reminds me, guys, we are going to be talking about health in Colombia. Are you using an APSA, to use the Spanish letters, or EPS system, or are you on private health? How has been your experience using the health services here? We're going to get to all of that in the second half of the show, so in about 10 minutes' time. But this time last week, Ollie, we were talking about the death of Carlos Holmes Trujillo, the defense minister. He's already got a replacement. We talk about the mayor of Bogota kind of being a poisoned chalice. Being the defense minister in this country is not exactly a walk in the park, is it? So our new defense minister, Diego Moleno, to give him a name.
Well, I mean, you've got to remember, of course, Brendan, the grand offices of state in Colombia are slightly different than they would be in many other countries. You're talking president, mayor of Bogota, and defense secretary. Those are the big ones. Foreign sec really isn't a big deal here. And of course, Home Secretary, a lot of those roles actually fall under defence. So yeah, it's a big job, which means a lot of potential criticism and so forth. Yeah, let's see how it goes. I think there's far more interesting right now is the jockeying that we're already, as we predicted a couple of weeks ago when we looked at 2021, what it was going to be like. Very much that jockeying for the presidential elections is started in earnest.
I just want to say one thing on Senor Molano. Yeah, very much looks, just reading his profile, that he's from the Mano Firme Corazon Grande Brigade. So I don't think we can expect too many drastic changes.
I would say that actually he's very much more Mano Firme and not so much Corazon Grande, but let's see.
Well, you're always the pessimist, Ollie. I'm so optimistic at this side of it, especially when I'm on the left side of the screen here as I'm looking at it. Anyway, yeah, the jockeying for positions and on all this kind of, as we said, musical chairs at the start, or as I said in my intro, quite fascinating, because there had been talk that Tomás Uribe, Álvaro Uribe's son, might be a candidate for the Centro Democrático in 2022. But if he's co-opted, I guess would be the word, if I'm correct, as vice president, if Marta Lucia goes because she wants to run her own race for Casa de Nariño, then he couldn't run for presidency. So it's kind of a what's at play here? Does he go for vice presidency, build up his profile, and then try and run in 2026, or say no, thank you, I'm going to run my own campaign without maybe too much experience, but with that Uribe name behind him?
I think what we're going to find here is that a lot of people are going to proclaim that they know what's happening, and a lot of people will be proved wrong and never mention it again, and one or two people will be right just by luck, and they will sort of dine out for a long time saying how grand they were for having predicted it. That's the way of these things. Look, I think 2022 isn't a great time to be president. I don't think 2026 necessarily is either. You're coming in just, you'll have to deal with oil sort of disappearing and literally drying up, not being there to be dragged out of the ground. Don't forget, that's still about a third of the Colombian economy. So I don't think it's a great time necessarily to be coming in. 2026 might be a better position. You'd have maybe a little bit more leeway to sort of criticize the previous administration. Yeah, I mean, we've seen all kinds of things predicted. I mean, while Marta Lucia is a fairly horrible, condescending person, in the vein of most of the Centro Democrático, it would be nice.
Conservative, in fairness, just I don't know. She's Conservative Party, not exactly. I mean, you can say they're.
Oh yes,
much of a
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Oh well, I mean, yes, no, I mean, I was saying this to you actually over WhatsApp earlier today, wasn't it? I mean, it's remarkable to me how obvious it is that so many Colombian politicians just absolutely believe in nothing. We complain in England, people like Blair or Starmer, they're pink Tories and that sort of thing. And of course, the Overton window in England is getting much narrower and much further to the right. But yeah, I mean, I've never, since my whole time in Colombia, I've never seen. I'll say actually, Gustavo Petro is an exception to that. He seems to actually sort of have clear policies and a clear framework of where it's going. Everyone else just seems to have, we want to get into power. That's it. And I'll hop onto whatever party, whatever alliance, whatever coalition I need to make, whatever agreement. It's very much naked, kind of Machiavellian power politics, which I find very odd.
And I'd add they'd also just run on the proviso that they are not communists or anything.
Oh, I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, if and when Tomas does run, and in fact, Martin Santos the same, if and when they do run, I'd imagine a large part of their campaign will be, my father was great, wasn't he?
Well, it's that thing. Whoever Uribe says, that's the one we go for. It doesn't matter if they put forward Mickey Mouse. Hey, Uribe says.
Well, what can I say? My next head of state is going to be the son of the current head of state. So I not from a position of strength on this. Not that I'm happy about it.
You do have a parliament, though, at least to keep checks and balances in place. Interesting, though, and I know we're kind of against the clock here, but just I like that prediction, Ollie, and we'll hold you to this one, though, that if 2022 is a bad year to become a president, it might be just the year that Colombia decides to go a little bit left and maybe goes with a Petro. and then it turns out to be an absolute disaster, and they'll all be, I told you so, guys, never vote left. And then they'll go back to the right-wing presidents that they tend to.
Yeah, well, I mean, Petro's unelectable, so it's somewhat of a moot point.
Yeah, well, we should say it'll be fun over the next 18 months. Or so, right, well, not exactly a cheery story, but kidnappings have been in the news on a kind of various number of levels. I guess we'll probably start with the foreigner element to this. 2 foreigners kidnapped in Cauca, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. What's the story with that?
Well, it's slightly misleading when they're sort of termed as foreigners. I mean, they both hold Colombian passports. As well as, they're both dual nationals, which I'm raising not to say, but the point is they've perhaps got more reason to be off the beaten track and so on and so forth. They obviously they're speaking Spanish. They're much more culturally aware than most people. We're not talking about, idiots in flip flops, backpacking into a dangerous zone. I mean, again, details are slightly hazy on this. 1 Canadian Colombian, 1 Italian Colombian, I believe. It's a bit of a sad business, I think, and also you've got to love Colombian reporting. Grupos armados. Well, who is this exactly? It reminds me a lot of being down in Guaviare, where everyone was talking about Grupos armados, but nobody could name who they were. Or nobody would name who they were. So,
well, take your pick, I guess, in many ways. Or it could be just, it may not be even a very organized unit. It might have been just people, perchance that this happened. Anyway, I guess we'll watch developments and hopefully that they get safe.
I think the key here, Brendan, is to remember that this isn't something new. This isn't because of coronavirus. As I've seen some foreigners in Colombia intimating. This is something that would have happened, 4 years ago, 2 years ago, a year and a half ago, very happily. Well, not happily, but very possibly would have happened. It's not an unusual event necessarily in a department like Cauca.
Yeah, and I think before all this, of course, time has kind of lost all sense of time in the last year. But as far as I can recall, there was an Italian kidnapped. Was it in 2019, perhaps?
Which is strange because it's usually it's not Belgians. It's usually French or Dutch, isn't it? That get kidnapped.
I don't know what that means, but there have been a number of Dutch, all right, in the past that have been kidnapped. But on that theme, then, but going back a few years, we have the political Farc, which have now changed their name, which we'll come to in a couple of minutes. But the leaders of the Farc are going to be sent for trial for kidnappings. So we believe all part of this HEP, the peace courts, I guess, for want of a better translation there. Where will this go? And is it a wise move that they are going to be trialed for kidnappings when we're in a peace process? Should it be just a case, as we kind of talked about this yesterday, of you wipe the slate clean and you move on because pretty much everybody has blood on their hands?
Well, philosophically, the HEP is a wonderful thing. And I'd very much like to see it succeed and dish out justice. However, the cold, hard reality of life in Colombia is that, what they're about to find out is that this is an absolute minefield. Basically put, we have the possibility that the Farc are going to be charged and put in jail. Certain FARC leaders are going to be tried and put in jail, and paramilitaries and military are not. In which case, a large proportion of the country is going to kick off. I mean, that's going to drive recruitment for the Centro Democratico like nothing else. Remember that the guerrilla here are absolutely disliked. There's no love for them at all. Sorry. If the FARC get tried, if the FARC get tried and the militaries and the military and paramilitary people don't, then you're going to have people running off back to the jungle saying this isn't fair, it's biased against us. If the reverse happens and you have military and paramilitary jailed but not enough of the FARC, then you're going to have a situation where people are going to be kicking off saying, oh, well, this is not about punishing the guilty. This is about... Now, remember, this has nothing to do with reality. Yeah, I mean, I'm not interested in sort of people saying, oh yes, but the paramilitary killed more people. Yes, they did, absolutely. I mean, that's a matter of fact. But lots of Colombians don't believe that. And unless you think you can change their minds very, very quickly, that's going to be incredibly controversial. Almost the worst thing is if people from both sides go down, then both sides are going to get angry. Pretty much. There isn't really a good way forward. And if you're a judge, you're in a really dangerous position that you're fundamentally looking for reasons to jail certain people or let certain people off just to create a false balance, an equivalence. Because politically, there has to be an equivalence here. And again, talking to a couple of friends just over WhatsApp last night, none of us can think of anywhere in the world that's done something like this before. It's really a bit of a first. You look at South Africa's Truth and Reconciliation. That was explicitly modelled on, we're not sort of dragging people into the courts. Good Friday as well.
And in Northern Ireland, yeah. Mm-hmm. It's like, as we said, it's like that kind of letting you wipe the slate clean and you try and move on because otherwise it just rumbles on and rumbles on and rumbles on. And where does it end? It never ends, I guess. Interesting that you talk about the fact of the matter that the Paracos, the paramilitaries, did kill more, but many Colombians don't believe it or don't accept that. I think there's an element to it that the Paracos are kind of seen as Colombian. The guerrillas are kind of seen as a foreigner. So therefore, they kind of accept what the Paracos had to do to defend the Colombian territory, whereas the guerrilleros were outsiders, an invading force in many ways. So they didn't see them as Colombians per se. I think there's an element of that at play. But we might as well just quickly, because I know we've gone past the half hour and we want to get on to health. Just in a word then, if you were picking a new name for a political party in Colombia, I personally anyway would try and move it far away from anything looking like communist or to the left. And Farc have gone from the Farc party to Comunes. Wonderful.
But as you said in your blog post, is just asking for people to say, "Oh, it's communismo." I mean, it's mind-bogglingly. I would almost think it were satire, were it not for the fact that it comes from the Farc, who, in virtually all the cases that I've met people connected to the Farc or visited camps or so forth, they are unbelievably deluded as to the reality of Colombian politics. I talked to a guy before the last election who genuinely was talking about, oh, if we get to the second round, this is, how we can win. And I was thinking, off his bloody rocker. The Farc aren't going to get to the second round of the presidential election. I mean, and they're eventually forced to withdraw, with what? Commanding less than 1% of the vote? I mean, they're just woefully unpopular. They're not like M19, who, stayed popular for quite a while. A couple of elections. After sort of successfully going towards the ballot box. The Farc can't do that. They just can't. Their name is worse than dirt. I mean, it's like, running under the Ian Smith party in Venezuela, in Zimbabwe, or running under a pro-apartheid party in South Africa. It's bonkers, actually.
Yeah, you just kind of came to my mind as like a Sunday league team or whatever playing Manchester City in a two-legged affair when they were talking about getting into the second round of the presidential elections. Like, oh, well, if we can get a draw at City and then we can take them back home, and you'd never know what had happened. Anyway, we'll leave that there. Good luck to Comunes as they contest elections in the future. Anyway, Ollie, health is wealth, wealth is health. What is it? You're well, like pretty much everybody, I'd say the majority of foreigners here on the APS, the EPS schemes in terms of health. So that's kind of the norm for most employees and self-employed foreigners here. I'm correct in saying that, am I?
Yeah, I'm with Sarah, and again, I'd love to hear from different experiences. If anyone else has any recommendations. So I must confess to a great deal of ignorance on, who's, I just went with Sarah because my first employer said, well, we do Sarah and here's the Sarah stuff. And I said, yeah, okay, whatever. I don't really understand what's going on here. It seems complicated. Why can't we just have an NHS? Yeah, anyway, I'm with Sarah for no real reason. I mean, I stay with them because they have a nice tiger. I like tigers. But yeah, I mean, anyone out there, anyone who's got a sort of recommendation or a word of warning on certain ones? Well, I have to say
I was going to say there are usually league tables published maybe every year, like what are considered the best ones. Like Sura would be up there at the top of the league table, I think. I've seen them before. Again, it's not an area that somebody suggested to me to go with Fami Senar a few years ago when I first paid into an APSA. So I did that, and then when I started with my full-time employer, they just continued. They were like, "Oh yeah, you're already registered." They put in my cedula, and they continued just paying into that APSA. So that's kind of the one. And now when I'm back self-employed, if I can even say that, independent government artist, but I'm not drawing anything. I went to a brokerage. You see these signs up on flagpoles or on telegraph poles as like pay your APSA ARL, which is kind of PRSI in a sense, pay related social insurance, we call it back home, for 75,000, 80,000. It differs from month to month. So that's how I operate with it as an independent now. Obviously, it's easier if you're an employee because generally, as far as I know, your employer just that money comes directly out of your wage packet. Yeah.
Sort of. Yeah, it gets a bit complicated with taxes later in the year. I really can't be bothered to go into that. But yeah, basically you're matched, your contributions are matched by your employer, which is why I'm technically on a part-time contract. But anyway,
that's another story,
yeah, so basically the way it works is, for people that sort of aren't au fait with the system, basically there's kind of different tiers within the EPS company. So some people pay for very expensive plans that cover a lot of things, and some people pay not so much money for things that don't cover so many things, and maybe they don't quite get the same priority treatment. I don't really understand how it works. I've never taken any interest. What I do know is that my payment plan can only go to a certain, like I can't select from, let's say there are 10 different payment plan levels. I can't select right down to level 0. I can only select sort of halfway down because of my earnings. And I think that's quite a nice system because essentially I subsidize other users of the system. So it does have a kind of taxation thing built into it. I don't think it's a terrible system on paper, EPS, to be honest. There are definitely swings. There are definitely swings and roundabouts on how it works. The British NHS is awful in some ways. It has some big advantages. Same thing is true in Colombia. And of course, again, not to bang this drum, but remember, we are talking about the 92nd biggest economy in the world, and we expect to have the 92nd best health service.
Just like talking about personal experiences, I haven't had to use the health service, thankfully here in touch wood, I will, that often. I actually just used it for the first time properly in 2019. Yeah, it wasn't last year, 2019. I think if I didn't have the APSA, I wouldn't have even bothered. It was just a slight concern that I had, and I went through it, and it was fine. But I remember interviewing another Irishman. If I can say, I think it's pretty public knowledge. Miles McMullen, he's pretty well known here. He's written a few books about birds and various. He's well known. He's based in Pasto, but he was suffering from cancer, I think prostate cancer, and he told me that the treatment he reckoned it was better than anything he would have got back home. He's from the north of Ireland, so under the NHS, the UK's NHS. And he said it was as good as anything. Like he couldn't fault it whatsoever.
Oh, absolutely. I had a little bit of a health scare almost a couple of years ago now, whereby I fainted. And certainly, getting out of hospital and talking to my family, especially, on Skype calls. Remember when we used Skype? It was really noticeable, right? My mother and my father both said, "Oh my, what? You got a brain scan like at the hospital the same day?" And I was like, "Yeah, it was like 8 hours later." And they were like, "In England, it would have been 8 weeks later. Like, as long as you're not dying immediately there, it would have been very much no. You go to the back of a queue, and we'll get to you when we get to you." So I do find it a little bit strange. Sometimes I talk to Colombians who kind of say, "Oh, it's ridiculous. I've got to wait a month for an appointment." And I kind of go, "Yeah, but in England that would be, my mother was on a hip replacement waiting list for literally, counted in years, not in weeks."
Of course, in the UK, not that I want to focus on that, but just to let people know, you could go private, could you, in the UK as an option, in the same way in Ireland? Because in Ireland, it's means tested. If you fall below a certain income threshold, you will get free medical care. But again, there'll be long waiting list. And those who can generally will have private health insurance and go private.
It is phenomenally expensive, though, to do so.
Yeah, I think Ireland, it's not... Well, I don't know. To be honest, I don't know how expensive. Because it's not compulsory. Like somebody like me working can decide if they want to have health insurance or not, even if you're not on the means tested health insurance. But anyway, we'll just touch in with a few comments here because again, it's kind of experiences. Delaney Turner telling us again, this seems a very positive one, that his doctor made same day house calls and was available over WhatsApp. WhatsApp, phenomenal. Well, it does seem if you have WhatsApp and your doctor, hey, can you call around? I've got a bit of a hangover this morning. What have you got for me? But as he qualifies in his next message, he realizes that service isn't available to many Colombians. And I will just say, in the last house I was living in, my housemate came into contact with somebody who was tested positive for COVID, and she was trying to get a test going through her APSA. Now, I know this is in the pandemic and things are far different as well, like they are all over the world. But she was just on hold. In the end, she just gave up because she couldn't get through.
Yeah, I can definitely imagine that. I have to say my experience has been good, but as I said, I suspect I'm on a relatively high plan. I'm amazed at how cheap it is, frankly. When you look at how much I'm paying sort of per month, my salary, it's absolutely nothing, really. And then basically, I just get sent out to a bunch of, subcontracted out to a bunch of specialists. And I'm paying, 28,000 or something, to go and get scans in Clinica Country or Cardio Infantil or wherever it might be. And this is genuinely good stuff.
I was going to say that might be the issue because I think it's been one of the first things I heard coming to Colombia was, oh yeah, the health system is on the brink of collapse. Now, I think we say that in Ireland pretty much every day as well. But I was given figures late last year by somebody who was dealing intricately with one health provider via a pharmaceutical company, and was just saying this is terrible. And I have heard of a lot of doctors here in various fields waiting months to get paid. So
I suspect private healthcare is exceptionally good.
Well, that's it. If you're in what is it, Clínica Santa Fe, where Juan Manuel Santos got his treatment, which again I think is a good indicator. You hear of Evo Morales, Chavez went to Cuba for his treatment. Not exactly a ringing endorsement for their own health systems. Whereas Santos, for his, I think it was prostate cancer, went to Clínica Santa Fe. So it's a thumbs up for that. Now, of course, it is perhaps the best hospital in the country, and then maybe one of the best ones in the region. So if you have the means, then it's pretty good. I'll just relate quickly my own little experience in 2019. The only thing, like if it was an emergency, because it was just a slight concern I had, and I just wanted to, to get an opinion on it from a qualified expert. I went through the system, and it was just waiting for dates to come up, actual appointments, free appointments. So if I was in a mad panic, I'd have to go to an A&D, I guess, in an emergency department. But with this, I was just okay. So like the day I looked, maybe I got the appointment. I can't remember.
Oh, well, when I got
2 weeks later, yeah.
When I had coronavirus back in November, absolutely, I didn't even consider ringing up Sarah because I figured it would take a week to get results or something. I just went immediately to Colcan and got tested.
Of course, now with coronavirus, I mean, you can just say, hey, I think I have coronavirus. And generally, if you get speaking to somebody, it'd be like, okay, we're
well, I think this actually, without wanting to, sound like somebody moaning about the snowflake generation or something.
Well, you never moan, Ollie. You never moan.
Because actually, I don't think this is a generational thing. I think this is at all levels. But there is the fact that Colombian labor laws and Colombian employers are often incredibly difficult. People take a phenomenal amount of visits to the doctors. I mean, speaking of somebody who has been to the hospital maybe 10 or 15 times in his life, with the bulk of that being the last couple of years because of the whole fainting episode and the knock-on effects from that. It just amazes me that, my students, for example, seem to go to the hospital every 5 seconds. And quite often, I mean, I actually went through a phase in the university of just saying, don't give me the what's it called? Medi Express is the kind of excuse note from the doctor that we have at the university. And students openly admit, oh yeah, of course, that's forgeable. I just say X, Y, Z, and they say, here's a week off study. And it's just a way basically to get a week off. And again, I think a lot of people do that because, and actually both times that I was kind of seriously in hospital after having fainted, both times the people ahead of me in the queue to get discharged made a real song and dance about making sure they got the time off work signed off, which just didn't even enter my head, because obviously even if they had said there's 10 days off work or whatever, I'd have said, well, okay, that's nice, but there's also work to be done. And if I don't do it now, it's got to be done somewhere down the line. So I might as well do it tomorrow. I've never really understood that point.
Yeah, snowballing it really. I guess it might be you're touching on we're a product of the systems we were brought up on, because in my household, because my dad was a landowner, not that we were rich at all, but we didn't have a medical card, so we didn't qualify for free medical care in Ireland. And it was basically, you're not going to the doctor, sonny boy, because we're not paying £40 for the GP to say you've got a cold. We know you've got a cold. You'll run it off, So I have that in my head now. I wouldn't go to the doctor unless it was I really felt I needed to go to the doctor or see. And of course, nowadays we all have Dr. Google, which is dangerous, I know. But a lot of us, we maybe go to Dr. Google first and kind of go, what is this? And maybe I can sort it out myself. By the way, Angela just writing in, I think she was referring to your health insurance, like prepagada. Is it? That sounded like you're in an APSA, so I'm not 100% sure, Angela, what you're on about. But prepaid, is it something like the mobile phone? I don't know. Anyway, in terms of, have you ever got, we're talking about vaccines for COVID, but the general vaccines that you're meant to get and should get when you're here. Now, a lot of people will get them in their country of origin before they come here. But have you received jabs here for different things?
Twice. I've had rabies after I was bitten by a dog, and yellow fever.
Jab, that is. You didn't have rabies, I hope.
Well, who knows? I mean, you don't mess around with rabies.
No.
Rabies is very much, if you have rabies, you either make medical science or you die. Medical science history or you die. So, yeah, I mean, rabies is a very serious situation, of course. And I mean, we have to be very clear, Colombia doesn't have very much rabies. You have to go back years to find somebody who died in Bogota, and years before that to find the next one. And they are always in unusual situations. I think the last rabies death in Bogota was from a woman who adopted a cat, from Cundinamarca, somewhere quite low. And the cat had rabies and infected her. Yeah, I was in rural Antioquia. So I didn't, certainly in Bogota, it's not something you'd worry about. Anyway, rabies, not easy to get hold of in the countryside, but once you're in a major city, absolutely very easy. And again, going into Sura, I just went in and said, can I have a rabies shot? And they go, yep, go to that room up there. I mean, not even showing any identification. I could have been anybody. They don't mess around with that. No. I just said, sit down, boff, there you go. And yellow fever. When I got it, this was a while ago now, 7 years ago, get yellow fever, simply put. I know a lot of people say, but they won't always check your vaccination when you arrive in Leticia or Mitu or somewhere like that. Yep, okay, valid point. I'm not going to say, but actually I would say that yellow fever is very much a vaccine you get for its medical reasons, not for administrative purposes. You absolutely get yellow fever. It's got a 25% chance of death if you get yellow fever. That's why governments are so serious about making sure it doesn't move about in their country. And again, Colombia gives it away for free. So
can you get it at the airports too?
Not sure. What I did used to remember, there's a sort of little medical doctors around the world. Well, it's not easy these days. No. Because actually the whole point was that the free yellow fever shots were absolutely not marked when I got it. You were funneled towards the Red Cross, pay 100,000 pesos or $50 or whatever it was back at the time. Go that way for this one. And then very much an unmarked sort of medical center around the corner where you basically go into the Fontibon Medical Center or one of their outposts, and an old guy just gives you a sheet saying, are you one of these risk factors? You go, no, clonk, there you go. Pretty horrible vaccine. I felt genuinely bad for a couple of days afterwards.
Yeah, well, I think as I mentioned to you in our pre-show chat that I got 3 vaccines in one before I came to South America for the first time ever, and it knocked me for 6, I have to say. I couldn't drive the car home that I had that brought me to the doctor's clinic. Angela has just written in to clarify, so the prepagada, it's like a faster health service, which I guess I can imagine it gets you greater access to appointments and get directly with the specialists and things like that. But again, it comes back to everything. It's very similar, Angela, in Ireland. If you've got private health insurance, you're going to get, I won't say better treatment, but you'll get treated before other people. You won't be in a long line waiting. Whereas, if you're on the public health service, the waiting lists tend to be quite long, which as you said, Ollie, is pretty similar in the UK as well. So money does talk in this regard. Blood donation, Ollie. I have a strange one. In 2014, because I wanted to donate blood because I'm just a nice guy. It had nothing to do with me wanting to find out what my blood type is because I had no idea. So I was living in La Candelaria in the centre at the time, and I went to, they had one of those tents up looking for people to donate blood. Walked by, oh, can I donate blood? Yeah, no problem. Went in, donated blood, nearly fainted because I always faint whenever a needle is stuck in me, or practically faint. I did find out that my blood type was B negative, but that's another story. But then I discovered years later, because I thought, you know what, I'm going to give blood now for no other reason than just to give blood. And I went up to a place a couple of years ago, and they're like, oh no, you're from Ireland, can't give blood. Mad cow disease.
Well, we should clarify here. From Ireland Irish of a certain age. It's about living in the UK or Ireland within the sort of mad cow period. Like a younger English person wouldn't necessarily suffer from it.
Well, but then you see, I got contradictory information on this because then I was told, oh, well, if you've been out of the country for X amount of time without making a visit back, then you're okay. But then somebody else told me, well, no, actually, if you were in Ireland or the UK at that time.
Yeah, for life, yeah,
for life.
And again, it's not about being English or Irish. Like you say, it's about living in the countries at that period. I have a Trinidadian friend who was in London at the time, and thus is barred from giving blood. Yeah, it's a constant point of annoyance for me because we often have the blood people, not vampires. That's a whole different thing. They're over there, but we often have the blood people sort of in the park behind me. So when I'm walking the dogs, they'll quite often jump out at me and say, "Hey, you might have a weird type of blood that we don't get much of in Colombia." I say, "No, I'm fairly normal. O for ordinary," as my mum says. But I can't give blood.
Yeah, well, that's it. And I actually do have a rare enough type, B negative, and Walter Suarez, it's brought a smile to his face anyway. It's my motto for life, B negative. It's in my blood. But yeah, I would like to give blood because I've never actually, I never donated blood in Ireland. It's only here in Colombia that one time, and now I can't do it. Even just today, I was up near Santa Fe, Centro Comercial Santa Fe, and the people were out and they're, hey, can you give blood? And I'd love to, but I can't. And with some people, I have to explain to them the reason why. But there you go. Ollie, there was a lot of things we didn't touch on with this, because obviously I don't have any experience of giving birth, and I don't think you do either. But I did have a lady from San Francisco on.
Well, I don't know. I was given birth too. Well, and I'm sure you were too.
Yes, yeah. But in terms of ourselves doing the pushing, no. Well, we might have. And so anyway, let's not get into that. But I did have a girl, Melissa Fabregas, on the podcast talking about her experiences and this kind of tendency to kind of push you towards cesarean sections. I think that's something we're going to have to touch in another episode, and we'll come back to it. There's a lot in it. So, guys, if there are any questions you have, you can still send them on to us via Twitter at Bogota Post, or if you're watching this after the event, as in not live, you can still write via the pages, Bogota Post, message groups, My Own Wrong Way, Corrigan, the blog, or if it's up on YouTube you're watching, you can write the comments there, because I think that's us done and dusted, Ollie. There's, of course, one thing next week.
Valentine's.
Yeah, so... of course, the 14th of February. Now, people will go, oh, but they don't celebrate Valentine's Day in Colombia. Well, we know in September it's the big Dia de Amor y Amistad. But, and Ollie, you've noticed this more than I have to say, although it is in certain restaurants, like it is recognized here. It's not like it doesn't exist.
Oh, yeah. Good luck walking around in Chapinero and not noticing bars offering deals, restaurants, clothes shops, chocolates, the whole lot. Yeah.
Yeah, well, we've got our producer saying tiempo. So the 14th of February, it also marks my 36th anniversary of my relationship with singlehood. But next week, guys, good luck. Ciao, ciao.